Hi, thanks for coming. I'm Hunter Kennedy, and I wanted to take a minute and tell you a little bit about myself and my own journey. Twofold. Number one is I think that if you are going to consider my teachings and the education that I'm providing, or if you're going to consider me for counseling or life coaching, or just to use this as my own experiences in life to plug into the model of the circles of life, I feel that it'll all make sense and help better. So essentially, the life and school of hard knocks that we all live is something that can, yes, be very painful, can be very difficult, and it provides many challenges. But ultimately, what the underlying impact of it all is that it shapes, molds, and chisels us, I would say, on a psychological, mental, emotional, and spiritual basis, which are all the inner qualities which I believe that we're all here to address, to heal, to grow, to basically shape into that divine essence as we navigate our way through this world. So, as if you've read any of my stuff previously, you understand that I believe that that is in conflict with the ego, which is basically oh, our self-fulfilling desire, our need to look good in the eyes of others, our need to be approved of and appreciated and esteemed, basically how we look versus who we really are on the inside, are the what I would say the dichotomy between the physical world and the spiritual world that we all walk. So, with that said, when I was young, my parents divorced when I was about 8, and Dad moved away, and Mom, brother, and myself ended up raising each other in two-bedroom apartments for the majority of my life. And so we had a pretty meager life. We lived paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. Lots of hardship and strife whenever curveballs or the unexpected things would happen. And that, from a very early age, taught me about the power and the importance of money in our society. So by the time I was probably 14, 15, and was starting to realize, that I wanted a car and mom had no money and things of that nature, money became increasingly important to me. So from a very young age, goal number one that I set in my life was that I was going to be a self-made millionaire by 35 and hopefully retired by 40. I carried that dream with me, and it became a fuel that became a mantra that pushed me all the way up until I was 35. So, to go back just to give filler information, that little circle ended up spinning lots and lots of battles in my world. So, for example, my imbalance, if you put money on a circle, one is lack, one is having. My imbalance on this circle, being that I lacked it, but I wanted to have it, created this dichotomy that fueled many of my decisions and a lot of my actions and behavior. So I ended up quitting sports at 16. I ended up getting a job and climbing ladders at a very young age, which made me, on the good side, more responsible, made me more industrious. I was a manager and a leader at a very young age because money was my goal and that was what was required. It also led me to study business because I had made what I thought was a logical assumption that if I were going to be rich and successful, it was probably going to be in the business world. So off I went to Indiana University to the School of Business to get my business degree so I could go be one of the tycoons running the world's industry. So lo and behold, the interesting part of these circles is that what we think we want and what is best for us, or what the universe wants, or what our spirit or soul wants for us, often don't align with what we think we want when we're driven by the ego or the material, physical world. Case in point, the universe was bound and determined where I was going to go, and it was going to shape me and push me there. So, long story short, with a bunch of very funny and very interesting segues through my little tour at Indiana University, I ended up getting moving into an apartment, and meeting the woman that I would marry, who would become the mother of my children. Simultaneously, that little love affair ended up costing me one semester's worth of GPA, which ended up keeping me out of the business school because my GPA wasn't high enough to get in. So, at that point, school had always come very easy to me. I was always one that was smart enough where I could get A's and B's without cracking a book. And so I never really learned how to study. I didn't learn how really even to read because I was very good with my mouth and the gift of gab, and I could listen, take good notes, and I was a good test taker. So now that I'm in my second or third year of college and needing to study, and you are not able to get an A or a B just by showing up, listening to lecture, and taking tests, I learned through the School of Hard Knocks. So getting back into the business school, well, first of all, getting kicked out, what you need to know about those little circles is that I was the first one on my mom's side of the family that had gone to college, and everybody was so proud of me and so sure that I was going to be a success. I had been telling everyone for years that I was going to be a millionaire by 35, to the point where I had them all convinced that it was true and that I was actually going to succeed. My dad's side of the family, on the other hand, had all went to Indiana University and were doctors and lawyers and business accountants and such, and expected that, of course, I would follow suit. Well, now here I am, getting kicked out of the School of Business was that blast to the ego that rings through the soul and the universe, to the point where I was like, oh my God, I'm getting kicked out of the School of Business. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What job am I going to possibly get now? How am I ever going to make money? How am I ever going to face everyone that believed in me? Everyone that thought that I was the hope and the one and all this, that, and the other. It was devastating, to the point where I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to face them. I didn't want to face myself. I hated myself. I hated life. Seriously considered ending my life. As I'm sitting there riding my motorcycle, all I could think about was just crashing it into the bridge head on at 100 miles an hour and just checking out, because I didn't want to face all of the stuff that my mind had imagined that I might be facing. So we all make up those stories. We all get into our little poor me and our little drama moments. I'm sure you can imagine from some point in your own life exactly what I was doing to myself and how I created this huge story about how this was the end of my world. So, long story short, I ended up calling the dean, talking to him, and he said, all right, here's the deal. Your GPA, if you take this class, and this class over again, and you get A's in them, your GPA will be high enough and you can get back in. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I had to do it over a summer class. So retaking these classes, ended up, yes, taught myself how to study, taught myself how to read, studied. I was in the library. I hadn't even seen the inside of the library at Indiana University until this summer. This summer, I studied 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, religiously, nonstop, as if it was for my life or death. And that's exactly how I did it. Taught myself how to study, taught myself how to read, taught myself basically all the things I needed to know, and took all these classes, got the grades, got back in. You'd think happy ending. Funny story, actually. So what happened was that one of the classes I had to take was a psychology class, which intro to psych or whatever, which I had gotten a D in. And so when I retook that, I was fascinated by it. I just loved studying. I couldn't wait to go and read my psychology text and go to class and to learn the lessons that it had to teach. And so took another class in the fall and loved it. I was a sophomore in a class of juniors and got the highest grade in the class. And they were all psych majors, and I was this business wannabe major. And anyway, long story short, I fell in love with psychology. So after getting back into the business school, I dropped out of the School of Business and transferred to the School of Psychology. Here I am, got my passion, got my school. I'm excited about studying for the first time in my life. You would think happy story. Well, not so much. I got a job. I actually graduated and ended up entering into graduate school, the Purdue at Purdue University in the Industrial and Organizational Psychology Department. Figured why not? Mix some business, mix some psychology, mix them up together, be the best of both worlds. Well, while I was in graduate school, I got a job at a mental health institute, and it was a dual diagnosis, mental retardation and one other form of ailment, and it was a live-in residential center. And I have to tell you, it was nothing like I had imagined helping people might be in the world of psychology, as all my studies had led me to see and think. And the other thing was is that I was the director of behavioral services for this 200 patient facility, and my pay was about $20,000 a year. Now granted, that was back in the 80s, and that wasn't a terrible wage, but it's less than I made when I was in college working as a movie theater projectionist and managing theaters. I was making more money doing that than I was in this, and I was supposed to have a master's before they would even give me this job. And so I saw my future, and I didn't see money. And as I explained, money has always been this important thing that's been an open, continuing circle that has been a battle that I've been plagued with. So as we're going through this process, I reassessed. I lost my passion. I lost my interest. I dropped out of school in psychology. I quit my job, and I moved to Denver, Colorado, and decided that I was either going to be a ski bum or I was going to find a job and I was going to make some money. Well, here we go again. When I moved to Denver, it was back in the 80s. The oil crunch was on. Jobs were being lost. There were no jobs, or there were very few jobs. The economy was suffering greatly. And here I am as this kid with no idea what he's going to do, but I've got a bachelor's in psychology, which we all know you can't do anything with in the field of psychology. So, long story short, I ended up taking a job in sales. And I was very good at sales. And so from a very young age, probably 24, 23, 24, I started making good money. By the time I was probably 25, I was making six figures a year in sales. And my sales career continued on, and I transferred into technology. And from technology, I went into wireless, and from wireless, I became a national sales manager of a company and took it nationwide and expanded it. And long story short, I was a self-made millionaire by 35 years old, had $1.4 million worth of net worth at 35 years old, with the house on the hill and all the toys and things that I thought that I wanted. So, as it goes, what I found out is that it was at that moment that I looked around and started doing an assessment of my life. I had married the girl from college who helped me flunk out of the business school, and we had 2 children. And here I am, had for, I would say, the time that we lived in Colorado, made myself her business coach, self-proclaimed of course, pushed her and drove her to excel in her business and her career, only to, once I reached my self-proclaimed goal of success, sit there and find that I was miserable on the inside. I was empty, I was dying, I was, you name it. I was depressed. I had all these things, I had all the successes, I was where I thought I wanted to be. But it was at that moment that I felt the most empty and the most lost that I had ever felt in my entire life. Maybe it was because I succeeded in my goal. Maybe it's because now I had nothing to fuel my passion, or now I had to refocus because my whole life had been about getting to this place, and once I got there, I had nowhere to go. So I did a lot of soul searching, and I decided that our lives and our children were more important than the money. Go figure. If you would have known me, you would have never thought that was coming out of my mouth. And so I started asking her to quit or to pull back, and for us to take it easy or to change our lifestyle. Well, now she loved her job and didn't want anything to do with that, and so continued the spiral. So it was shortly after that that we ended up getting divorced, and I can tell you that I was no longer a millionaire, which is ironically funny in itself, and I'm back to living in an apartment. Another irony. First house I ever lived in was the one I bought myself with my first sales job, and here I am back to living in an apartment, which, full circle, I found that pretty humorous. And in the meantime, had made my goal, was a millionaire by 35. By 36, I was divorced and was not. Found that pretty funny. And here I am, and what, when, where, how, what am I going to do? Where's life going? So what I had done was I had learned that I could get into the sauna, and when I was feeling sick or had something coming on, cold, flu, what have you, I could get in and I could put myself in a meditative state, and I found that I could heal myself basically just through mind and body and connecting them. And anyway, I was able to do this. On one night, which I will make another video to explain all of this. This is the introduction. But on one night, I had an experience that changed my life forever. It basically, whether you call it an out-of-body experience, you want to talk it, talk to God, the higher self, the inner self, the connection to the spirit realm, whatever. This is what happened, and it showed me things. It opened my eyes and showed me all the things that I had been chasing, all the things that I had been doing. I'm sitting there on my knees talking to God and saying, why me? Why is this going on? And it basically showed me that you don't understand. What do you mean I don't understand? Well, the bottom line is that you, from your perception, from the way you view the world, you won't get it. Okay, I'm having trouble with this. Give it to me anyway. So it went on to tell me that I would have to change my perception of my entire life. Okay, what do you mean? Well, it said pick something. I said, all right, why did I have to grow up being a fat little kid? And just as quickly as I asked the question, I had a picture of me. Had I not been, see, another circle, I grew up overweight, I would say a fat little kid. Up until I was probably 15 or 16, I was always overweight. Probably because of my daddy issues and eating, or emotional, or stuff and anger, or whatever. You psychologically, we can name it whatever we want. Bottom line is, I always had a weight problem, and I was always battling. I had terrible self-esteem. I had terrible self-image. I was picked on. I had man breast. I was embarrassed. Call it out. Couldn't take off my shirt, didn't want to go swimming in the summertime, blah, 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 blah. Was just always dealing with that. Well, come 15 or 16, I ended up getting where all 16-year-old boys get. I was interested in girls and who would possibly love or want to be with this fat kid. So I decided that I was going to lose weight even if it killed me. So basically I stopped eating. And in one summer's time, in like 3 or 4 months period, I lost 50 or 60 pounds. And my junior year, when I went back to high school, I was literally 70%, 65% of the man that I was the year before. And now I was 145 pounds. I was like buff. I was young. I was basically, I was in shape and I looked good. All of a sudden, the other side of the circle with my body and my appearance, well, now I was ego. Now I was getting told by everybody how great I looked and how hot I was and how fantastic it was and all of those things. Girls were coming out of the woodworks. I mean, all the things I never had, my life flipped around 180 degrees. That developed quite a little ego inside of me. Look at me, I'm the man, all that stuff, the other side of the circle from before. I had no self-esteem, no self-respect, terrible self-image. Well, now it was on the other side of the circle. And I tell you that to share. So here, it used that example. And so the voice said, imagine who you would have been, how your life would have turned out, what you would be like as a person had you never been that fat little boy. And before it even finished explaining, I knew exactly what it was talking about. It was showing me who I would have been had I never had the perception or the thoughts or the balanced experience of the pain and suffering or of the humility. Because to this day, that fat little boy still lives inside of me. To this day, I still think, from that perspective and have to balance my own thoughts and have to see myself and ask myself, okay, which me is answering this question? Because there are several of me in here. And so it's that kind of lessons that this voice went on to teach me. And I said, okay, what about my dad leaving when I was 8? I always had a big chip on my shoulder. I always thought, poor me, woe is me, why doesn't daddy love me? All those kind of basic thoughts that us kids have. And it again showed me very quickly. My relationship with my mother and my brother was like the Three Musketeers. All for one, one for all. We were taking on life and we did it together and we did it very well, and we've had a very tight, strong, close bond that has lasted, all of these years. On the flip side of the coin, I had the vision. Had my dad stayed, I saw my dad and my mom arguing. I saw me and my dad having power struggles, and I saw myself being angry, argumentative, combative, drugs, alcohol, runaway. I mean, problems, never not finishing school, just all of those things. And my mom crying and heartbroken, and her and I not having much of a relationship. My brother and I, we had, in this vision, we had no relationship because he was younger than me, and I was always gone out running, and he was left at home, to deal with mom. And I saw this just as if it was like, here's how it was, here's how it would have been. And just that clear, I started understanding what it meant. All these things in my life, and it went on and on and on, but I'm going to spare you all the details for this. But it went on and on and on to point out all these areas where I thought that I had been punished, or where I had been the victim, or that I had been wronged, or that I wanted to curse or hate God, or that I thought life was meaningless and terrible and punishment, you name it. All of the things I believed were erased, changed, shifted in this particular session in a sauna within an altered state of consciousness when I was addressed by, and it showed me the truth. And the truth was, all of these things were not for punishment, they were not for my pain, they were not for my suffering. I brought all that on myself by the way I thought about it. It showed me that all of these things were to balance, shape, and shift my spirit, my person, my personality, my being, to keep me humble, to keep me in check. Not too much of anything, not too much of this, and to teach me the circles of life. The circles of life is the model that I'm teaching to you now, about perception, about awareness, about choice, about experience. To give you some examples, well, that fat little kid ended up going on to be anorexic and bulimic and being hospitalized because bleeding ulcers at 19 years old. I almost died. The doctor, because who would think to check for ulcers in an 18-year-old kid who looked as fit and in shape as I did? The doctors were baffled. Little did they know that I was anorexic and bulimic and a senior in high school drinking beer every night with my boys didn't help anything, and that my stomach was chewing up and eating itself from the inside out. So that created eating disorders, body image distortion disorders, on and on and on. The whole school thing, well, I'd left school, I'd made my success, now I had this experience. What did I do? I went and quit my job as the national sales manager. I went and wrote a book about choice, experience, and perception, and I became a student and started studying philosophy, spirituality, various religions and teachings of the world and the ancients, and I just wanted to know all of it because I had had an experience that changed my life, and I wanted to know everything there was to know about it. 10 years later, here I sit trying to teach them. On the same hand, after I quit my job and left, I don't know, I would say life, I would tell you that I was a completely different person. I had tapped into spiritual gifts, power, energy, source, whatever you want to call it, and things happened to me and for me and with me. I became a philanthropist. I started working with kids and charities. I had more experiences than I can even share with you, but basic, ridiculous things that I would never even have believed. Being able to heal people by touch, being able to pray something and have it appear, being able to close my eyes and meditate and focus on the weather and being able to change weather. I'm not even lying to you. This really happened, and I have proof. But that's another story, and that's not what this is about. What I'm letting you know is that's how in touch and how in tune a human being can become if they're focused and balanced in heart and mind and spirit, which is the teachings of the circles of life. My belief is that's where society is going, or at least needs to go, if we're going to actually make the transition into this next time, the age of Aquarius, what have you, and we're going to do so successfully. We're going to have to change our perception. We're going to have to put on a new perception and decide to make different things important. We're going to have to make the inner being more important than the outer being. So, back to the story at hand. This ended up leading me, well, my ex ended up moving back to Texas and with her job and such, and so I didn't want to be an absent father because of my own life experience with an absent father. And so I moved to Texas, sold my house, quit my job, had started a publishing company, wrote a book, had all this stuff up and running, left, walked away from all of it, moved to Texas. When I got here, had nothing to do, didn't know anyone, didn't know what to do or where to go. Long story short, I went back to school. And back to school, I went to get that master's degree that I left the first time. Loved it, straight A student, all of it was just fueling my passion. I learned, it was so funny. As I'm sitting there going through all of these master's classes in psychology and counseling and studying theory, I'm reading about what I had written in the book that I wrote, choice theory, existentialism, experiential psychology, cognitive therapy, and narrative therapy, the story that we all make up. I'm reading about all these things. In my book, I thought I invented most of them. I had no idea that all of these thoughts that I had had or was having from this experience were already out in the world, and I just didn't know about them yet. Henceforth, when I talk about awareness, increasing awareness, everything is already at our disposal. We just don't know about it, so we don't seek it out, so we don't look for it. Anyway, went on to get a doctorate in psychology, and all of that full circle right back to the path that I had originally started on before I let my goals for money and my needs for success change my path. The universe, through all of these school of hard knocks and through all of the tough things, will circle up. one of the reasons that I think that I'm an effective therapist and a good life coach is because I have had so many life experiences of my own that I have dealt with. Ego, imbalance, personality issues, issues with mom, issues with dad, issues with weight, issues with image, issues with health, issues with you name it. Spinning circularly around. I've been to every extreme. I've been rich and I've been poor. I've been the man and I've been no one. I have been up and down and fat and thin, and all of this has been the journey through life. Ups and downs, ups and downs. The roller coaster, the school of hard knocks. I understand it all. All of it is all working and geared towards consciousness. Each and every one of us is a sentient, conscious being, and it is that consciousness that lives deep, deep, deep within our core, which I explain in the Circles of Life model, that each one of us has to become aware of, using the outer world and the inner world, the transition between mind and what we experience in the world, to work through this until we can come to a balanced place and we can access that inner higher essence. And I am very confident this is exactly the place that Jesus taught as the inner kingdom. The body is the temple, the kingdom is within. This is what I think he was talking about. It's exactly what other masters and other spiritual religions and teachers have taught. It is consciousness. It is that inner being, or the indwelling being, that is the one that is the real us that we need to find. And that is the purpose and the point of my teachings, of my counseling, of my life coaching, because all of the things that we deal with in life are issues that we either can accept, or we make a huge story and make them mean something, or we let them become things in our way, barriers, if you will, that stop us from doing what we want, who we think we are. All of these things are things that we need help working through sometimes. The bottom line is that life is whatever we make it. What we see, how we think things are, what we believe, is what drives our actions, our thoughts, our behaviors, and that ultimately is what generates the life that we end up experiencing. If you don't want to experience those things, or if you're not experiencing what you currently would like to or want to, if you're not living your dreams, if you're not living your passions, if you're not following your heart and your happiness and joy, something's off. What? That's what I try to help people find out. Getting back on the path. So, anyway, there'll be plenty more videos. I just wanted to give you a quick synopsis on who I am, why I'm sitting here, and what I'm up to. Have a great day, and please feel free to email or contact me if you have any questions pertaining to counseling, life coaching, or the Circles of Life. Thanks.